Okay, now I have to go back to the end of part 3 for a couple minutes. About a minute or so before the end of the very last part, so the end of part 3, there was a scene with Lulu and the Countess dancing. Now, this scene with Lulu dancing with the Countess is interesting in the sense that in the 1920s, a lesbian relationship couldn't be shown on screen. It was not allowed. Society would not accept seeing something like that. So the nearest thing you're going to get is these two women dancing together, and obviously watching the body language that goes on between them. They have the kind of intimacy with each other that means they've likely been more than just dance partners. And obviously the Countess is in love with Lulu. So this part hints at something that otherwise couldn't be shown. When the Doctor is watching Lulu and the Countess dance with each other, I'm almost wondering, looking at the expression on his face, how carefully he's looking at them, if he suspects something. That's the first thought that comes to my mind in watching this scene. And I think he does. If you watch the expression on his face when he interrupts them dancing, it sure looks like jealousy flaring up to me. Okay, by this point in the film, we start to see which character is the better manipulator. Dr. Schoen had probably thought that Lulu was just beautiful and dumb, and he would be able to basically use and discard her, which is more or less the world system. But we see that now, instead, Lulu has outsmarted him by using his lust for her beauty to control him, and has actually gotten what she wanted in spite of his wishes. And keep in mind, both these characters intend to use the other to get what they want. Dr. Schoen especially is not a likable character. In comparing the Doctor and Lulu, I would actually say, just on the basis of the fruits of their actions, neither of them are very moral people. But there is a difference between them, and the difference is Lulu has no illusions about herself or her actions. So, I would say the Doctor's far greater pride and arrogance makes him more unlikable, far more unlikable than Lulu. He's almost, we would call him from this a stereotypical character, but there are enough real-life examples of men exactly like him that we can't just dismiss his actions here as some kind of entitlements because of his wealth and powerful position in society. Instead, we should be comparing him with his real-life counterparts. Just imagine in his place playing this role, your least favorite entitled, self-centered celebrity. The character of Dr. Schoen in this film he was sort of one-dimensional, because he's obviously another wealthy man who basically believes he can use and discard whatever woman he wants, and probably from watching the first, we'll say, third of the movie, where he seems to be somebody who has a private life and then his public life. In other words, he hides behind a set of false appearances. And again, when you watch his actions and his personality, he's I think the least likable character in the film. And in essence, what happens to him, I think, really, I'm going to suggest that he gets what he deserves in this film. Or he's the type of character that I personally, and I think probably several other people would say, we love to see someone like him get screwed over. Because that's what he does to us in the normal events of life. At this point in the film, however, in terms of class warfare, all the viewers in the lower economic classes of society get a little bit of a vicarious thrill at this point in the film, because in this scene, the street hustler outsmarts the respectable millionaire. I think here the motivation in Lulu's case for the outcome and the outworking of these events is probably her rage that was shown in the scene with the Doctor when he brings his fiancée to see her dance at the theater, and how angry she got at being basically pushed aside for another woman. And I believe that probably caused her to force this outcome. By this point in the film, at least for now, we could say Lulu has got what she wants. She's now the wife of a millionaire, and she's eliminated her competitor. It's almost, we'll say, a black comedy to watch two characters who go into a marriage, both intent on using the other. For sure, this kind of a marriage is not destined to last, or that it may last only as long as it takes one of the two to find a better option and then start looking for a way out. I think having these two characters anywhere near your wedding night celebration is a recipe for disaster. How Dr. Schoen reacts when he finds these two scumbags in his bedroom with his bride, I think this is the only time in this film I actually agree with what the doctor does, except I think he should have shot them both instead of letting them get away. Another feature of the doctor's character that makes him really unlikable is that he comes off as a typical rich, what we'll call a fat cat, someone who believes that because he has money, he's entitled to use and discard anyone that he wants, and everything in the world is for him, it's some kind of a plaything he can basically amuse himself with until he gets bored, and then it's time to throw it away and find something else. We could probably estimate from this features of his and his character is that he is the one thing that separates him from Lulu, or that makes him different from Lulu, is he's a hypocrite playing a role, where Lulu gets whatever she wants without care for the consequences or whoever has to suffer them. This film is a very slyly crafted morality tale, which I think implies through watching some of these characters' actions that we in life we all get what we deserve. And by this I mean, a big part of human nature is to smoke for 40 years and then blame God when we die of cancer. By this part of the film, however, I think it's starting to make the impression that the consequences are becoming more serious. And I think in essence it means that playtime is over. The big difference, however, between Lulu and the doctor is Lulu's motives are never hidden. I think in some ways you could say she's more honest with herself, and especially with others, that she never hides the fact that she's out to get what she wants. Whereas the doctor, he has one thing she does not have, and that's hypocrisy, because he's playing a role as this respectable big shot in society, and really what he's doing in the shadows is he's serving himself and his pleasure, right? So I think out of that it's making a point that the people that maybe appear to be respectable are maybe in actual fact worse than the ones we would tend to look down on, because typically in this movie Lulu gets all the scorn and all the blame and is labeled the immoral one, but the doctor is using her just as much as she's using him, yet somehow his transgressions are overlooked, even though they're actually both alike in the sense that they both let nothing stop them from getting what they want. In terms of actual or practical morality, I see very little difference between them, except there's no false appearance with Lulu. Now this scene is probably what you'd call the final straw for the doctor, as his last illusions, I think, here are probably shattered. They're probably destroyed, because he may have been thinking up to this point that, well, at least Lulu isn't banging my son. She's maybe doing it with everyone else, but not him. Now he's probably even second-guessing that. Dr. Schoen here, actually, he reminds me of the Pharisees that Jesus spoke about in the Bible, who they believed because their sins were all done in secret and were effectively hidden from most of the people, that this made them righteous, because no one knew what they were doing in the darkness. This is what he reminds me of. It stings, it pokes at the sting of the hypocrisy of respectability, that certain people are allowed to sin or transgress in certain ways, and I think some of the way this play is written shows the hypocrisy of the playwright, because he He tries to portray the Doctor as more righteous than Lulu, but I think in actuality the reverse is true. And he, although he should be the person that's, we would say, from his position in society and maybe his success, should be the one that's most admired. But as I said before in the other parts of this commentary, he's the least likable person in this entire film. Even though maybe some of us may admire him because he, up to this point in the film, was the best or the most skillful at getting what he wants in life. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is when I say that the Doctor is the most unlikable character, I don't mean in any way that he's morally the worst, because there is one other character who is far more morally deficient than the Doctor is, but because he's careful to appear like a clown, we don't notice how dangerous he really is. Remember, a lot of the moral judgments that are applied to these characters, and I'm speaking of, this is from the perspective of the playwright and probably most of the audience who would agree with them, is that all these comparisons between these characters are all based on relative morality. Either they or the playwright sees them as more or less moral compared to Lulu. But again, in actual fact, because with maybe the exception of two characters in this whole film, all of these characters are users and manipulators that are out to get as much for themselves as they want. The reality is when you're watching this film, most of the time you're watching what's happening in a proverbial barrel full of snakes, or what you would see, say, within prison walls, where nobody in there is innocent, and where in essence this film is sort of like watching a bunch of predators find out who's the king of the jungle. But one of the reasons I really like this film, and I think this film is so great, is because here from this section on, or especially in this section of the film, and then through the rest of the film, it makes us look at ourselves and asks us about our own individual morality. And this is why I think this is a really great film. And the slight revisions that Pabst made to Lulu's character to enhance this were genius. In this film we see, as in real life, that these characters, or we'll say most of them, are playing a role in order to get what they want, with little regard for anything else. What I would call the morality sections of this film, so Acts 4 and 5 especially, so this act and the next one, and maybe a little bit of 6 and 7 also, remind me slightly of one of Stanley Kubrick's greatest films, Eyes Wide Shut, which used masks to show people as playing a role, and that there was a false appearance, and then the reality underneath was very, very different. And this film, in some ways, it reminds me of that, because it's almost like most of these characters in this film it seems like they're all wearing masks, and their true intentions are always hidden. Okay, in this scene I'm going to give a little slight translation of the German, and I guess I've also included Spanish subtitles for our Latino viewers also. I'm going to give a slight translation of what's said in this long paragraph here near the end, where Dr. Schoen and Lulu are struggling with the gun. He told her that to kill herself when he handed her the gun, and in the long paragraph after he says basically that if she doesn't kill herself, he will kill her. So this raises the question of whether what she does at the end of this is self-defense or not, and I think you could argue I think it actually is. Because I'm out of time once again, my concluding thoughts on this scene will have to wait for the very beginning of part 5.